Hey there folks, thanks for tuning in. So today's video, this one here is how to make a mushroom pot pie. This one is getting pitched at in this particular edit for people who have very little experience in the kitchen towards no experience in the kitchen. I take you through every step of the process from prep work through to cooking. There'll be a different edit put together for people who have got a lot more experience in the kitchen and have got a general idea of what to do, of all the prep stages, etc. We'll just cut towards the actual cooking of the dish. So without further ado, let's crack on and let's make a mushroom pie.
After washing and cleaning your mushrooms, the first thing we want to do is measure out somewhere in the region of 500 to 525 grams of chestnut mushrooms. And unlike nearly every other one of my recipes where we're either slicing or we're even chopping our mushrooms, this time all we're looking to do is quarter them. When you're buying your mushrooms, you're looking for ones of this size or even just slightly larger. We don't want small mushrooms on this particular dish, we want nice big chunky beasts. And as we chop them, just set them aside in a large bowl for later until we require them. We then want to chop our brown onion, and we're looking for rough chops on this. And to go about it, first of all, we take off the top of the onion and then we half it from the root side downwards by laying it on its flat side and then de-skin it. And once de-skinned, we're going to hold the onion as you see, and we're going to cut towards the root end. We don't want to cut all the way through the root end, just right up close to the edge. Turn 90 degrees and chop downwards, and this will give us our rough chop. If we're looking for a finer chop, we just space the actual cuts closer together. And same idea again from another angle, cut towards the root end without slicing all the way through, just as close as you can get without going through the bottom of the onion or the far away part of the onion. Turn 90 degrees and we chop downwards, and that's how we get our rough chops. Just keep your fingers out of the way, tuck them back so it's more knuckle exposed than fingertip. And as you see, I've got my protective glove on here because I've got a habit of slicing my fingers. And now add your onion to a separate bowl from the one that you've got your mushrooms stored in, and then you're going to cover this just to protect your eyes because you don't want the fumes from the onion leaving your eyes stinging too much. So I use silicone liners, but there's plenty of options you can use. Anything really just to stop those fumes getting into the room and getting your eyes stinging. Now, I currently use a lot of frozen garlic. I get into this habit during lockdown where fresh garlic was harder to come by, and frozen garlic, you could have an awful lot more of it and store it for longer. Is it as good as fresh garlic cloves? Absolutely not. It doesn't hold as much flavour, but it still does a job, and it's still useful to have in your armoury, which is why I feel it's a good thing to actually show in the videos. Tend to just add one extra clove if you're using frozen over fresh. And we're looking for about 200-250 grams of carrots. That's one very large carrot or two medium carrots tends to give you that sort of ballpark. Then we want to peel our carrots and remove the top and the bottom of them, top and tail them. And after topping and tailing, we want to slice the carrot down its entire length of its body so we've got a flat surface to lay it on and work from. Then we're going to cut it down its length again in half, depending on how large your carrot is. You might then want to cut either side of it, or as we're doing here, as they're quite slim carrots, we're just going to chop down its length so we've got nice, even, small, a few millimetres wide, 5-6 millimetres probably is what we're talking, chunks of carrot. And from here, we're looking to take our chopped carrot and set it aside in yet another separate bowl. And then lickety split, repeat the process for the other carrot. So peel, top and tail, slice along its length, slice along the length again after you lay it on its flat side, and chop it into 5-6 millimetre rough chunks. Now, when it comes to celery, I tend to freeze it in bags of single stalks because when you buy celery, there's always too much celery in the bundle that you buy for a recipe. So I immediately blanch what I don't need, then flash freeze it in my freezer. It works brilliantly. It holds its flavour really, really well if you're using it within a couple of months of you actually buying and freezing it. So that's the way most of my celery enters my meals, because 1 or 2 stalks is all you need, the rest you freeze. Now, you could use tinned sweet corn here, but that would mean having to freeze some or using a larger quantity depending on how you want your actual dish to turn out. But 100 grams of frozen sweet corn here. Peas also work really well in this, same weight of peas, 100 grams depending which one you want to use. I like the sweet corn because it just gives a slight visual differentiation because of the yellow stands out, but if you don't want to do that, the peas are lovely too. And as you see, we're adding the sweet corn, the carrot and the celery all to the same bowl because they're all going into the dish at the same time when we start cooking them. Next up, a cheap white wine. I just use supermarket own brands, and we're looking to measure out 80 millilitres of wine, and we're going to set that aside. In the same volume of vegetable stock, this will be quite concentrated because 1 oxal cube, as you see me here using, makes 190 mils, 180 mils, I'm trying to struggle, 180 mils of stock. So this will be quite a concentrated stock what we're adding, but it's going to work really well in the dish. Now to a small ramekin, we're going to add 1.5 tablespoons of soy sauce. And in a separate ramekin, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of just standard table salt. And to that same ramekin, we're going to add half a teaspoon of ground black pepper. And next up, we're looking to measure out 50 grams of plain flour. I just measure this up into a wee small side plate and just again set it aside until we require it. And now in a separate ramekin, we're going to be adding 3/4 of a teaspoon of thyme. And to yet another ramekin, we're going to add half a tablespoon or 5 grams of light brown sugar. And we are now looking for 35 grams of vegan butter. You could use dairy butter if you're not a vegetarian vegan, but I like using the vegan butter because it's a perfect substitute for dairy, and it's every little bit we can do to help the environment. I think we should all be doing. So 35 grams vegan butter, and we're going to add this straight into the bottom of a large heavy based pot. Now, in the time that we've been doing everything else, our frozen garlic, if we're using frozen, should have defrosted enough for us to be able to chop it. Now, I'm still on the fence with this one, but if you want, sprinkle a little bit of salt onto your garlic, and what it's supposed to do is help prevent the garlic sticking a little bit to your knife. I'm not 100% sure it does yet. I keep trying it, and my brain sometimes thinks, yes, that little bit of salt prevents a little bit of sticking and makes it come off your blade easier. But I'm just not sure. So hence in this one, I haven't done it. In other videos, you'll see me sprinkle salt on garlic when I come to chop it. If you're using fresh garlic, maybe you chopped it earlier, but if you haven't chopped it, chop up your fresh garlic now after de-skinning it. And once chopped, we're going to add it to our bowl with the onions. Should have mentioned this earlier, it does tell you on your packaging for your ready-made puff or pastry or your crusty pastry that you should leave it out your fridge for about 20 minutes before you start to roll it, as it just makes it roll that bit easier and give a bit easier. You can leave it for a bit longer than the 20 minutes if you want as well. If you leave it too long though, it gets a bit sticky on the packaging and it becomes harder to remove. So there's a balance about how long you want to leave it at room temperature before you come to use it. And before laying it on your surface, sprinkle out a little bit of plain flour. It just stops it sticking, and then sprinkle a little bit of plain flour on the top of the pastry as well before we come to roll it out. Now, we can leave that sitting there just now, and we're going to get our vegan butter on, and we're going to start melting it in that large pot. And to melt it at a medium heat, and only once it's fully melted are we going to turn the temperature up to high. And whilst the butter is melting, we're going to add 80 millilitres of boiling water to our stock cube, and we're going to let that set aside and dissolve. If you need be, go in with a small spatula or spoon just to break up the cube and help it dissolve. And as it says, once melted, turn the temperature on the butter up to high, and then we're going to see it bubbling away, and we're going to add our onion and garlic mix. And we want to fry that for 3 minutes until it's beginning to soften and until it starts to turn golden. And now that the onions are caramelising and they've turned golden, we're going to add the carrot, the celery and the sweet corn, and we're going to cook that for 4 minutes at a reduced temperature of medium high. So we're turning the temperature down just slightly, give everything a stir together and cook for 4 minutes. Depends on the mood I'm in, which one I use here. Sometimes I use vegan cream, other times I use coconut milk. Both work equally well. This time round I've decided to use the vegan cream in the packet types that you find here. Now whilst that's cooking away, I tend to now get the vegan cream out because we don't want it going off or sitting at room temperature too long, or organise the coconut milk. So all we do is we take and we squeeze out the appropriate amount. Now luckily, and I'm just doing it this way to show you because otherwise I could just squeeze the entire packet straight into my food when I require it, but one packet of the vegan cream, one sachet that we see here, is almost exactly 2.5 tablespoons. It's so close to the 2.5 tablespoon measurement, the 45 milliliter, that I just accept that and go with it. Sometimes it's slightly more, sometimes it's slightly less, it just depends on how it's been filled and from what manufacturer you got, but the one that we see here, the manufacturer I was using, is 2.5 tablespoons almost exactly, so that's why it's a good one to use. And now we want to add the quartered mushrooms, and we're going to saute these in the mixture for around 5 minutes. And just be sure to give everything a good mix together as the mushrooms reduce down in size and cook and start absorbing all those flavours. And now we are looking to add our 1.5 tablespoons of soy sauce to the mixture. The purpose of the soy sauce is to deglaze the pan. Deglazing is using a liquid of some nature, this time being soy sauce, to remove any stuck food particulate to the bottom of the pan where you've got that almost burn-in stickiness. The soy sauce is there to remove that, and we use a wooden spoon, flat-edged, along with the soy sauce. And as the 5 minutes progress, we'll see all the mushrooms begin to lose their volume and contract into their cell, and a lot more space will again begin to form in our pan. Whilst that's happening, we're going to take a flat-edged wooden spoon and we're going to slide the flat edge along the bottom of our pan just to remove anything that's sticking to the bottom. And now that the 5 minutes is up, we're going to add our 80 millilitres of white wine. This is our backup deglazing tool, so to speak. If the soy sauce hasn't broken down and removed any of the stuck food particulate to the bottom of the pan, the white wine is the beast that's going to help remove anything that's still there. So again, with the flat edge of a wooden spoon, we just go in and we scrape along the bottom, moving the white wine across it. And give everything in your pot a mighty stir and then leave it to simmer for 2 minutes. And now we can add our 80 millilitres of our vegetable stock, and then we're going to follow that up with all of the rest of our ingredients. Which means we are adding our plain flour, we're adding our cream or our coconut milk, depending on which we've chose to use. We're going to add our light brown sugar, our thyme and our salt and our pepper. And then we're going to mix everything together until it's fully mixed. And once fully brought together, we're going to cook for about 1 or 2 minutes. This part does not take long at all, just until we see everything start to thicken and come together. And just as we see here, over those 1 to 2 minutes, the filling really has thickened up, and that's it perfect now for transferring into the pot that we're going to be putting in the oven. Now, the pot I'm using here isn't the very best dish that I could be using. It's a little bit too deep, but it still does the job really well, and of all the pots I own, it's the best one for the job. But if you had something a little bit shallower, I would go with that. So again, from here, what we want to do is we want to take and we want to transfer our mixture from the pot we've been cooking it in to the one it's going to go into the oven. Now, by now, the puff pastry we brought out to leave it for that 20 minutes, that should be ready to be rolled. Now, what I do is I tuck the corners in slightly before rolling it out. And what you can do as you roll it out, you're going to be left still with a sort of squarish shape. Take those corners and fold them back on themselves if you aren't getting close enough to a round shape. I don't think it actually did it in this video, pressure of filming I guess, but if it's holding that square shape, fold the corners back on themselves once you've rolled it out past the size it needs to be, and then roll again and you get it closer to the round shape that's forming. You can also, as I'm doing here, use your hands to help shape it into a round shape just by pressing and tucking. Both work, it just depends on which way you want to go. I tend to go the opposite way from what I've done in the video, which is to fold the corners back onto themselves and then roll it out again. Now, as you are rolling out your pastry, use your lid from the pot that you're putting in the oven to measure its size. We want the pastry to be larger than the size of the lid, because if it's under that size, it's too small for the dish that we're making. And we're looking for it to be maybe 2 centimetres larger than the lid all round. So just work with it and roll and press as required. And if need be, as you see with me doing my fingers here, just take and push and press out towards the shape that you need once you're nearly there. And from here, we're looking to take and transfer our pastry into the pot that we're using. We're going to press it down nice and tight and flat to the surface of our filling, and then we're going to press it onto the edges of the pot. If it's one that's slightly lower and shallower, you don't have as much coming up the outside of the pot as I've got here. You just need to work with the size of the pot you've got. And once the pastry is in place, we're going to take and cut 5 perpendicular lines down the centre of the actual pastry. We don't want to go right to the very edge, leave about 1 centimetre or 2 from the edge as you're cutting from one side to the other, but we're cutting 5 perpendicular lines down and across it. Again, you could use dairy here, but I use nut milk because this particular dish is vegan. And as I've said already, I think we should all be doing what we can for the environment. You could use dairy milk, but I'm using 30 mils here of nut milk, and we're going to pour it into, that's a wee medicine cup actually, so great for having it around the house for small measures. We're going to take a silicone brush, and we're just going to brush that over the entirety of the pastry. And now take and give a right good brush over the pastry just so that we've got a nice good even coating across all of it. And into a preheated oven of 200 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes on the middle shelf it goes. And if cooked to perfection, we'll have a lovely golden brown pastry. It'll have a really nice rise on it and all the sogginess will be gone. Oh, I like a little bit of sogginess in my pastry. The missus doesn't, and if you're doing it right, it shouldn't have it. So if done correctly, that's what we'll have. Now, doesn't that look good? Yummy, yummy, yum, yum. Now, depending on how greedy you're being, this can serve 6 portions, or it can serve 3. We tend to make it as 6, but there's sometimes, you know what, you're just being really, really greedy, and let's just divide that into 3 portions. But it's a really lovely filling pie. Take something like a cake knife and slide it around the outside just to break the seal of the pastry, and then we're just going to take our knife and we're going to cut through into whatever size of portions it is we're going to be going with. A really sharp knife works best because it is a flaky pastry we've made and we don't want to completely destroy it. And it's not the most conventional of tools for serving, but I find that a fish slice works really well for getting in and pulling out the exact size of the portions, and that way there's not going to be any fight over who's getting the most filling. Not that that happens anyway, but hey, let's create some dramatic tension. So But if you want, use a spoon, but as I say, the fish slice, it comes in really handy for getting straight down and getting that sort of equal portions out of it.
So here we go, one mushroom pie. I'll try and not live up to my name of hanger management, because this is a very late dinner when I was promised somebody would be home an awful lot earlier. So dinner time. One mushroom pie. There's a real rich depth to the sauce within the pie. We all know what a puff pastry is like, so don't need to go into too much depth in that. Just make sure you cook it through properly. There's just a real breadth of flavour to the mushrooms. It's a real nice, hearty meal is the way I'd probably describe this one. So, not going to labour it because I'm bloody starving. So, I'm going to go and eat my dinner, and you guys stay safe, take care. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, thanks for the wee thumbs up things, and stay safe. All the best.